everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another episode of the mel0n review. Now, I've done a lot of skate reviews on the channel before. I've covered a lot of skates from X-RayPad and a couple other brands, but I haven't talked about one of the brands that have been in the game for the longest, and that is ESP Tiger. So I figured it was about time I finally got my hands on some of their skates and checked them out. So today we're going to be reviewing the ESP Tiger Ice V2s and their YanZi dots. Now, my primary interest in covering these skates was to see how they compare against the X-RayPad skates, because those are my current go-tos, because I love the Obsidian skates, and the Jades are also pretty usable as well. So I wanted to see how ESP Tiger's offering stacked up against them, and turns out that ESP Tiger actually had some very solid skates. I'm very excited to tell you guys all about them today. Now, before we get into it, I do want to quickly clarify this review is not sponsored or endorsed by ESP Tiger. I purchased these skates myself, so this review is not sponsored or endorsed by anyone. Now, I do have to give a quick shout out here to Potent Gaming Gear. They're a Canadian retailer, and that's where I purchased these ESP Tiger skates from. Unfortunately, I got a defective set of skates, and they were actually kind enough to replace them and send over an extra set for me as well, which was very nice of them. So if you're in Canada and looking for a retailer, it's not in the States, for X-RayPad and ESP Tiger stuff, I'd highly recommend you check out Potent Gaming Gear. Again, not an ad or anything, I just wanted to shout them out for replacing the skates so quickly. I was very kind to them, and this review wouldn't have been possible without them. Now, with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, now in terms of product information for the Tiger Ice V2 and the YanZi dots, I actually wasn't able to find a lot of information about them. Between the Lethal Gaming Gear, Potent Gaming Gear, and ESP Tiger's site, there was shockingly little information about these skates. Even on the packaging themselves, it doesn't really tell you a lot about them. So it was kind of hard for me to figure out what they actually do, because with X-RayPad stuff, it's oh, this is a speed skate, this is a control skate. With these ones, it was a little more murky, so bear with me as I'm kind of flying blind with these. The Tiger Ice V2s retail for $12 Canadian per set, and the YanZi dots retail for $10 Canadian per set. Both sets come with 2 sets of 20 skates for a total of 40. They are covered with the same protective sheet we've seen on other skates, which is nice to see. There is also 2 alcohol wipes included in each set. Both the skates do come with a little instruction manual. It tells you how to install the skates, and also it tells you how to install grip tape, so I guess it's a dual use thing, but at least that's nice to see included. Now, one weird thing I did notice is that on all the product pages for the YanZi dots and the Tiger Ice V2s, it does show them coming with a little remover tool, but none of my skates came with a removal tool, which was kind of odd, and I'm kind of disappointed because I actually wanted to try that. So I'm not really sure if mine just were missed during QC or they just discontinued that plastic piece entirely, but regardless, it's not like you really need it, but it would have been nice to test it. Now, in terms of the skates themselves on these little sheets of 20 skates, the first thing you're going to notice here is that these skates actually come in different sizes. So unlike the X-RayPad, Jade, and Obsidian dots, which were all one uniform size, these actually have 4 different sizes. Now, this is actually really cool for a variety of reasons. It does allow for a lot more flexibility in terms of the installation, because not every mice has very large cutout areas. So if you only have a very small cutout area, like here on the Stormbreaker here, you can put 3 of the smaller dots on each of the corners, or 4. You can fill in the entire area however you want it, instead of putting 1 big dot there. However, because they are different sizes, it's going to heavily affect how the skates are going to feel in terms of performance. Just keep in mind, if you use the smaller skates, things will either be a little faster or a little slower depending on your setup. It shouldn't make a huge difference, but it is something I did want to note. Again, I actually do really like the different sizes. It's a very cool idea. Just keep in mind it may affect your performance depending on how you install them on your mouse. All right, now let's talk about the Tiger Ice V2s first. In terms of the skate design, these are standard, just rounded skates, very similar to what we saw with the X-RayPad skates. They are made out of pure PTFE, so again, very similar to the Jades, keeping in line of a speed skate. They're going to be very similar here. They are using a standard 3M adhesive, and the actual shape of the skate is a concave base with a convex top. Again, very similar to other dot skates we have seen. Now, since they are dot skates, just like every other dot skate I've talked about before here on the channel, they will have usability issues on softer pads like the Fnatic-2, the Infinity Mice pads, and the Raven Mori V2, just because the skates can't compensate for the depth of the pad, so the bottom of your mouse will scrape up against the surface of the pad. This isn't unique to ESP Tiger. This happens on all dot skates, but I just wanted to mention that because that is something that people commonly miss when they purchase dot skates. Now, just like the X-RayPad Jade skates, they are usable on glass. They do actually feel surprisingly good on glass, but because they are pure PTFE, they do wear very quickly. So the life of the Tiger Ice V2s is going to be a lot shorter than a hardened PTFE skate or a polyurethane resin skate. Unfortunately, the Tiger Ice V2s do have the same downside as the X-RayPad Jade dots and Jade donuts, where the usability is pretty poor because the adhesive commonly peels off the bottom of the skate, not the bottom of the mouse. So unfortunately, you're going to have the same reusability issues here on the Tiger Ice V2s as you did on the X-RayPad Jade dots and Jade donuts, which is unfortunate to see. This is pretty unavoidable because the material difference here is really not a lot you can do about that. Now, in terms of work-in period, there really wasn't a work-in period on the Tiger Ice V2s, so to speak. I didn't really notice any difference between stock ones and ones that have been used for a couple days. There wasn't really any noticeable difference in my opinion. If there is going to be a difference, it's going to be extremely minimal, maybe an hour or 2 in terms of a work-in period tops, but the differences are very minimal. Now, from all my testing across the board, the Tiger Ice V2s have basically 0 static or initial friction. They just move immediately. There's no extra force you have to do to get the skates moving. Very low stopping power, of course, because they are ice skates, they are speed optimized skates. They're going to have basically no stopping power, so you will be entirely reliant on your arm arm for that. The glide is very smooth though. I really do like the way these skates glide. Very similar to the X-RayPad Jades, just a little different in my opinion. Now in terms of performance on glass, ceramic, carbon fiber pads, and resin pads, it's essentially the same as it was on the Speed Hybrid Control fabric pads, just it's going to be a little slower due to the increased friction on those pads, with some differences in terms of stopping power and static friction. Audio feedback on glass, ceramic, resin, and carbon fiber pads is also very low due to the 100% PTFE nature. So again, just like the X-RayPad Jade skates, very quiet, but of course they do come at the cost of much higher wear due to their softer nature. Overall, the Ice V2s are pretty much exactly the same as the Jade Dots. They're not as good as the Jade Donuts, of course, because there's going to be a difference in the sizing and the surface area, but they're pretty much exactly the same size. I do think the Tiger Ice V2s have a bit of an edge because the different sizing options with the skates, which is a bit of a double-sided sword, as I mentioned before. The only other real downside, I guess you can say, about the Ice V2s is the reusability, but even that, we have the exact same situation on the X-RayPad Jade skates. So realistically speaking, pretty much one for one, just the Tiger Ice V2s have the benefit of having different size skates in the packaging, which is a really cool thing to see. Alrighty, next up let's talk about the YanZi Dots. Now these are a very interesting shape for a skate. These are, according to ESP Tiger, they're 2.5D shape. Now these skates are more of like a cylindrical shape with a slightly rounded top and a slightly curved edge, much wider surface area than you see on traditional Dots and the Tiger Ice V2s. It does have the same PTFE makeup as the V2s. Now one really interesting thing about the YanZi Dots is that on the bottom of the skate, they are actually flat. They're not concave like we see on other standard Dot skates like the Tiger Ice V2s. Now the cool thing about this is that this prevents the skates from caving in, where on other Dot skates, because of this open area in the middle, you can kind of push them in and cause the top to cave in a little bit, making the skates inconsistent. Now personally speaking, I've never had a problem with that before, but it is cool to see because it does increase the durability of the pad to prevent any issues with inconsistencies with the surface performance. So that is something really cool to see here on the YanZi Dots. Again, I have not seen this on any other skate before, so that is a really nice attention to detail. Now the YanZi Dots do have the same situation as the Tiger Ice V2s, where included in the packaging is a bunch of different sizes of the skate. So depending on how you use these and how you place them on your mouse, there will be some differences depending on the skate size and how they're going to perform. Again, just like I did with the Tiger Ice V2s, I'm just going to use the biggest ones for this review to keep it simple. Just keep in mind if you use the other sizes, there may be some minor differences with the performance. Now, one other really cool benefit of this more cylindrical, I guess you could say, design of the YanZi Dots is that they're much more usable on softer pads. So pads like the Fnatic-2, the Infinity Mice pads, and the Raven Mori V2, where traditional Dots don't really work, the YanZi Dots can actually work just because they're so much larger in terms of their surface area. Now, I will say the YanZi Dots are much more usable on glass pads than the Tiger Ice V2s are because of their larger surface area. The wear pattern on those is going to be a lot more even across the larger physical size of those dots. However, because the YanZi Dots are made of the same PTFE material as the Tiger Ice V2s, they are still quite soft. Like you can actually kind of put grooves into the skate with your fingernail, meaning that the wear is going to be very high on these as well. So you can use them on glass. They are much better than the Tiger Ice V2s on glass, but they will wear very quickly. You won't have to replace them as frequently as the Tiger Ice V2s or other Dot skates that are pure PTFE, just because they have a larger surface area, so they're going to be a little more resistant to wear, but they won't last as long as like a resin skate or a hardened PTFE skate. Now the YanZi Dots are using the same 3M adhesive as the Tiger Ice V2s, as I mentioned before, but they are significantly more reusable. I'm not really sure why there's such a difference. I'm assuming it's just like what we saw with the X-RayPad Obsidian and Jade skate, where the Jades were really bad for reusability and the Obsidians were better just because the adhesive sticks to that material better. Same situation here. I was able to move my YanZi Dots between multiple mice without any issues with the adhesive, which is great to see. So you don't have the same issue here with the reusability on the YanZi Dots as you did on the Ice V2 skates. Now in terms of working period, the YanZi Dots are going to have a slightly longer working period just due to their larger surface area being more cylindrical and just ever so slightly rounded on the top. I would say around 2 to 4 hours depending on the pad you're using. There wasn't a massive difference between non-worked in and worked in skates in my opinion. I didn't really notice that big of a difference, but just keep in mind there is going to be a bit of a working period here on the YanZi Dots. Now in terms of performance testing, I did 4 of the YanZi Dots on my X2H and I tested them on all the same pads I did as the Tiger Ice V2s. Now surprisingly across the board when it comes to fabric pads and fabric speed, control, and hybrid pads, the YanZi Dots and the Tiger Ice V2s were actually very similar. The only real difference between them is because of the larger surface area on the YanZi Dots, there was this ever so slightly more static friction, a little more stopping power, and the glide was a little more controlled, but there wasn't nearly as much of a difference as I expected. I went into this thinking this was going to be like comparing the X-RayPad Jades to the X-RayPad Obsidian Dots, because those were like 2 completely different dots and they work totally differently, where the YanZi Dots and the Tiger Ice V2s are actually very similar, which is very surprising. This continues on resin, ceramic, glass pads, and carbon fiber pads. Again, pretty much exactly the same as the Tiger Ice V2s, just some slight differences due to the larger surface area on the pads. The only big difference, I guess you could say, in terms of performance was the audio feedback on the YanZi Dots due to their larger surface area was a little higher than it was in the Tiger Ice V2s when using them on harder pads like glass, ceramic, carbon fiber, and resin pads. But between the Tiger Ice and the YanZi dots, they were actually shockingly similar. I do actually really like the skates. They just didn't perform as I expected them to, because I was expecting them to be a lot more on the control side. I would say this is kind of like a hybrid skate. It's a middle ground between the X-RayPad Jade dots and the Obsidian dots, if that makes sense. So it's like a middle ground skate. But despite them being kind of a middle ground skate, I actually really do like the physical change of these skates. Again, I love traditional dot skates, but of course they have a lot of usability issues on very soft pads, where the YanZi dots managed to avoid that almost entirely with their like cylindrical design. So I love the shape here on the YanZi dots. They're definitely very, very unique. I do wish they were a little more on the control side, personally speaking, but I do actually think they're very good skates. I really, really do like them. Alrighty, well, in terms of final thoughts, overall, I'm actually very impressed with ESP Tiger's offerings here. The Tiger Ice's V2s, while being maybe a little boring compared to the Yizang dots, are very good. They're pretty much one for one with the X-RayPad Jade skates. I really do like them, but they do have the benefit of the different sizes, which is really unique. So they do have a bit of an edge there. The YanZi dots, in my opinion, are the star of the show here because they're very, very unique. Their unique sizing with their cylindrical, slightly rounded design makes them a lot more compatible on a lot of pads that dots traditionally can't be used on. Their performance is very, very unique, and they're just overall a very, very cool skate. Of course, they also have the benefit of having different sizes as well, which the X-RayPad Obsidians and Jades do not have. Of course, there are some downsides to that different sizing, but I think in this case it works better, specifically on the YanZi dots because they're much higher surface area. Keep in mind that ESP Tiger skates are a little bit cheaper than X-RayPad skates. Of course, you're not getting the same performance as you would from an Obsidians compared to the Yizang dots, but in terms of the Jades, you're basically getting a cheaper set of Jades with the same performance. So overall, I'm actually very, very impressed. Again, the Yizang dots are definitely my favorite. I really like them. I would love to see ESP Tiger maybe make a control focus skate in the future, because again, the Yizang dots in their current form are more of like a hybrid skate. I would love to see the same cylindrical design, but made out of like a hardened PTFE material like the Obsidian dots, because I love the Obsidian dots. They're like one of my favorite skates, but they're still dots at the end of the day. And having the performance and the feeling of hardened PTFE on the Obsidians, but in the shape of the Yizang dots, would be an insane skate. Those would be absolutely nuts. But in their current state, I still do think they're very good offerings. Both the Tiger Ice V2s and the Yizang dots for their price are very, very solid skates, very comparable to offerings from X-RayPad and the other skate manufacturers out there. But that is going to be everything for this episode of the mel0n review. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I do a bunch of other reviews like this, focusing on mouse skates, mouse pads, pretty much everything under the sun I cover here on the channel. So if you'd like to see more reviews like this, be sure to drop a sub on the channel. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a member here on YouTube. Members get their name shouted out at the end of videos, and it is the best way to directly support the channel and my efforts with the Teardown project and all the other things I'm doing here on the channel. You can also use my affiliate codes over at Lethal Gaming Gear, Raven Mouse Pads, and TJ Exclusives to help support the channel that way. Big thank you again to Potent Gaming Gear for making this review possible and helping me out with that defective set of the Tiger Ices. I really, really appreciate that. But that is everything for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next episode of the mel0n review. Peace.